Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. It's Fran here and I'm back with a new video. Today's video is going to be the Matchday 5 team review, but more specifically the Matchday 6 team selection. I'll be going through the clean sheet odds for Matchday 6 and also the goal scoring odds, and then also talk about strategy with this kind of Matchday 5 team review. So with the team review, I would say the strategy here, of course, is to simply move out the players who've been knocked out and try to field the starting 11. A lot of us won't be able to field the full starting 15, and I don't think there's a need to do so. I think -3s will be very, very damaging because there aren't many picks to pick between. And when you look at the forward positions, I think a lot of us are going to be locking in Giroud, Mbappe, Messi. So that's already maybe 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3 transfers done. And then if you look at the midfield, there aren't too many options, right? Because big hitters have gone like Paqueta, Fernandes, Saka, and you now have to invest into maybe some more Argentine midfielders to kind of round out your, let's say, list of 5 or 6 Argentine players. So you can maybe move into options like Di Maria, maybe Enzo Fernandez as well. But I don't think there's much of a high ceiling with players like Rabiot. And of course, if you have the fortune and the availability to do that, and that's not going to hurt you with a -3, then go for those moves. But the ceiling isn't really there with the midfield. And as far as the defense, I think we've seen that this French and Argentine team have both struggled to actually keep clean sheets versus technically weaker opponents. And in this case here, even though that they are the overdogs, I think we can talk about them in the clean sheet odds section. But investing too much into Argentina and France's defense isn't something that really fills me with much confidence. As far as my actual team review, though, of course, quite happy with the Neymar transfer. It was the right decision. Mbappe actually blanked in that game, so keeping Messi was great. The power captaincy just didn't pan out, though, because I think I was going to captain Messi anyways after Neymar, or probably just keep the Neymar captaincy, but the difference of that was really just 1 or 2 points. So power captain would have been lovely if I actually was able to keep it for the semifinals or the finals, but we've used it, and unfortunately Messi and both Neymar had fantastic games, and no one else in our team really did. So that's kind of how the power captaincy panned out. And of course we have a lot of players to take out. Nice that we had Saka, of course, for the assist. And the Guerrero transfer was something that I forced, as I mentioned on Twitter, away from Luke Shaw. And it didn't really pan out well there either. But I think, of course, Morocco advancing to the semifinals is something so historic and so lovely to see. I don't really care too much about the fact that I'm losing 3 Portuguese players. As far as Molina, lovely to see him score a goal, thanks to the great Leo with the fantastic assist there. And unfortunately, that's going to be the team. I think the best pro that I have from owning Molina is that he actually is able to play this game, because the next game Acuna and Montiel are suspended. So if you do own any of those 2 players, do think about transferring them out immediately. They won't be playing. And of course, if you have someone like Saiss from Morocco, then you also have to think about transferring him out. I think at this point, I'm not really interested in actually doubling up on my keepers. I think Emi Martinez is the one that progresses. I think he's the one that I'm going to keep. I don't think I'm going to bring someone like Llorisen or even Bono. So that's going to be how my team kind of looks out going out of match day 5. And if we look at the clean sheet odds, I think what's interesting about this situation here is, of course, we have 2 overdogs here in Argentina and France, and Croatia and Morocco. Nothing much is too expected from these teams, even though Croatia and Morocco have posted really good defensive results so far. If you cast your minds back to Croatia and Morocco, that was actually a game where they both scored 0-0. And I would say Croatia have been a relatively strong midfield. Morocco have been impenetrable, really, both from the kind of mid-block and also just the final 4, even though they've had some injuries already to some key players, such as Aguerd, the centre-back, and then also Mazraoui, the left-back. And so with Saiss being out, I think that's going to be potentially the nail in the coffin, because you're now really struggling to actually field out a much more strengthened Morocco and XI. And I think, of course, this French team have shown that they have a lot of gunpowder. I think Dembele had a really poor game versus England. He's probably going to step up again. I wouldn't say France have the most depth. Of course, Kingsley Coman is someone that will be asked to play if, let's say, Dembele has another poor game. But the depth isn't there for France. The question is whether they can actually do it versus this Moroccan team and this Moroccan low block. And in my opinion, I would say they're perfectly capable of doing it. I think Mbappe is someone who is capable of defying the exceptional. And Giroud, as I said, is someone who's improved year on year and can really benefit from Saiss being out. So for me, I would say the clean sheet odds seem bang on. France's clean sheet odds are actually very, very high, even higher than Argentina's. Whether you want to invest into a triple up of France, I think that's a little bit of a stretch. We've seen France concede versus some pretty weak opponents, such as in Australia so far. And of course, the Tunisia game doesn't really count because that was a game where they pretty much practically played their B team. So I would say, of course, with France here, what you're looking at is probably a good opportunity to keep Theo Hernandez and also maybe double up with someone like Koundé, or just go for Run if you think that there's going to be a high chance of him getting set piece benefits there from getting a header. Koundé is someone who I quite like because he does take up some pretty offensive attacking positions. Then, of course, he will also cross the ball quite a bit to someone like a Giroud in open play. And I think when you're thinking outside of the set piece scenarios, he's probably someone that's going to benefit a little bit more from this team. So I think Koundé is going to be the interesting pick to go for. And then with Argentina, I think Molina and Emi Martinez are the two options that I own from my team myself. I'm not going to be going into a third option there. But I do think Molina is someone that you absolutely have to put into your team if you don't have him already. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Whether you need to double up on Argentina, I actually don't think so. I think Croatia are perfectly capable of scoring. We've seen also Croatia being capable of dominating other midfield teams outside of Brazil. So in my opinion, I wouldn't really invest too much into the Argentine defense, even though the clean sheet odds are relatively high. I'd probably look for a double up with both teams maximum. And in terms of the ceiling of players, I think even though Morocco have the lowest clean sheet percentage, I don't really like the odds of actually going for a Croatian defender like Juranovic or Sosa. I just don't think that they've been actually that interesting this tournament so far. Of course, Juranovic had a great chance versus Brazil, but beyond that, I don't really see the benefits. I think the center forwards have been really, really poor. So even crossing to options like Kramaric or even Petkovic just don't seem that appealing to me. And I don't see the chances of getting a clean sheet versus Argentina, in my opinion, that are perfectly capable of scoring versus Croatia. And that's kind of my thoughts right now on the clean sheet percentages. If we look at the goal scoring odds, so this is where things get quite interesting. I think Messi, Mbappe, and Giroud, those are non-negotiables. You're probably going to lock them into your forwards. But then the midfield options do actually prop up here. You have players like Perisic, players like Di Maria, and players like Modric that you can all invest into. And if you want to gamble a little bit more, I think the midfield options such as a Perisic, such as a Modric can be a little bit more interesting because you have that safety blanket of that third place match. So even though Croatia could get knocked out versus Argentina, they could still once again deliver in that third place match. And what I like about Di Maria, of course, is that a lot of people will kind of be sleeping on him because he's been injured. He also hasn't amassed many points compared to an option like Enzo Fernandez or even someone like a McAllister. So Di Maria can be out of people's minds, whereas you could actually invest into him if he does get if you get the news, that he will start. As far as the forward positions, whether you'd like to go for a gamble and move away from someone like Giroud, I mean that's perfectly fine. I think Julian Alvarez is probably the only pick, or Lautaro Martinez is the only pick. Whoever starts between the two of them is the one that I actually go for if I really want to sidestep Giroud. I think Griezmann is probably actually affordable if you move out of some of your midfielders and move into some of the cheaper ones. But I still think that because of the way the game favors goal scoring more, I would say Giroud is still probably the better option. Of course, he's got the goal scoring odds to back that up. We still haven't seen a French penalty, but I think that would still probably fall towards Giroud. So that's a huge benefit there for Giroud, and I think he's the one to invest into if we're talking about forwards. But there are some differentials in here. I would probably stay away from them myself, though. So for my Matchday 6 team selection, I've actually opted to make 4 out of 5 provisional transfers. And the idea here is that I've locked in 3 of them, and one of them is actually just completely dependent on the lineup news of Argentina versus Croatia. But showing my defense here, first of all, the only transfer that I'm going to make 100%, and I've already locked that in, is Hakimi in. Shaw is someone that I actually replaced with Guerrero, so that's going to be a graphic error. Apologies for that in advance. But Hakimi is someone that I'm really interested in picking because he can be a threat in multiple ways. And he also has that security blanket of being in that third place match. What Hakimi can benefit from is taking direct free kicks. He's actually scored screamers before. Even Mbappe has actually praised him for one of the previous screamers he scored for Morocco. And of course, Ziyech is someone who will compete for him from a set piece point of view, but I think doubling up on both of them is actually a good way to approach this Moroccan team. Yes, they're missing out on Saiss. Yes, they're missing out on Mazraoui, but Hakimi is also someone who can actually attack very much in open play throughout the right and also kind of take an overlapping position. Theo Hernandez has been actually quite shocking so far in this tournament, and I do think that Hakimi can find a little bit of success on that sort of left-hand side of France because Mbappe and Theo Hernandez aren't necessarily the most defensive of players, and they can leave space in behind, and they can also expose themselves when, for example, someone like Bukayo Saka is able to move into and cut inside like Hakimi potentially could himself. As far as Martinez, Molina, these players I kept because of the impacts of my 5 Brazilians being knocked out, and I kept them. My team was quite lucky to actually enjoy a Molina 7-pointer there, but that's going to be the scenario that I'm benefiting from. And Marquinhos and Shaw probably going to be maybe a second free transfer for a French defender, but I'm not 100% sold on it because we've seen some pretty poor defending from France overall. I think there's just much more higher ceilings from the midfielders in this tournament. As far as the midfield, if we move on to that quickly, I'm going to spend 3 out of 4 provisional transfers on this team. DePaul is someone who already is there, very low ceiling, not many interest at all into keeping him, but he has to stay because I don't have the option. I don't have the flexibility. I'm not going to waste a -3 on him. As far as Perisic and Ziyech, though, these are options that for me are also key players for their teams. Of course, you have Boufal on the other hand from Morocco, but I think he's also not going to benefit as much because I think Mazraoui was a huge net positive for the build-up of play on the left. And then Perisic is someone who I think has been crucial to this Croatian team. He's gotten 2 assists and 1 goal so far. He's also delivered many times before for this Croatian team. And I think he's actually still the most interesting player. A lot of the centre-forward chances and a lot of the players who've occupied those positions outside of the Canada game have largely been disappointing for Croatia. So I don't think any of the centre-forwards are interesting. Perisic, even though he's not really shown much of a kind of lethal edge from actual just pure shooting of the ball or striking of the ball, I think he still is going to be the main man for Croatia, so he's going to stay in my team. As far as Ziyech, he's someone that I'd like to invest into simply because I think the third place match could provide another kind of higher ceiling for Morocco. And if there's ever going to be a chance, maybe from a little bit of a janky set piece, then it's going to really come from him, from the deeper set pieces that he takes, and even some of the corners. So for me, Ziyech is quite interesting to get. And he, of course, is also someone who takes 2 to 3 shots on target per game. Not on target, sorry, but just in general from long-range chances. And I think, hopefully, there could be a small little chance of that versus France. You never know. So Di Maria is going to be that kind of ace in the hole here pick, and I think a lot of people are going to be thinking about what about McAllister, what about someone like Enzo Fernandez, who's already delivered in this tournament, whereas Di Maria has been relatively quiet so far with just 1 assist. I would actually say that Di Maria has been crucial all this time for Argentina, and of course, even though he's not had the best of World Cups, and he's also been injured for 2 out of the games, technically, I would say Di Maria is still probably the option that I fancy the most if he actually gets to start, because specifically that he only played 8 minutes in the previous match, and hopefully he's gotten enough rest to actually find himself fit and starting for this game. If he starts, he's definitely going to be the transfer that I bring in. If he doesn't start and you have Enzo Fernandez and McAllister, I actually think it really just depends on the tactical setup of Argentina. For me, Enzo Fernandez is the better option if Argentina continues with that back 3 structure that they debuted versus Netherlands. However, if they stay with that kind of back 4 and they operate with McAllister starting on the left-hand side, I do think McAllister is the better pick there. So it really just depends on the lineup news for Argentina, specifically for this slot in my team. As far as the forwards, I don't think there should be much deliberation here. I think it should just simply be Giroud. I think he's been a fantastic addition to this French team, especially since they had kind of operated with Benzema for a while now. And of course, Giroud starting, Benzema being injured, has shown once again the improvement in Giroud as a player from recent years. Because if you look at, let's say, the previous World Cup, I think he was actually acting very much so a decoy, whereas now he's actually one of the talismans of this French team alongside Griezmann, who's found a lot more form, kind of rejuvenated himself as a player again. And then, of course, Mbappe, who's pretty much at the peak of his powers. So Giroud has been quintessential for France this tournament, very much so in the England game where Mbappe was kept a little bit more quiet versus Walker, and of course a very compact England defense. And Giroud is someone that I think is going to be that kind of key talisman in this game here, where Morocco of course play very much towards the center, but they're missing someone like Roman Saiz who could actually defend very well versus Giroud, and this could be the opportunity for Giroud once again to strike, as he has done so 4 times in this tournament already. So Giroud is going to be the easy pick to pick in, and of course Messi and Mbappe I think are non-negotiable for this kind of semi-final round. It's very easy to go into them, and that's going to be my team selection. As I said, I still have 1 free transfer left to think about if Di Maria is going to be the transfer that I lock in. I'll probably actually take Fernandes out and probably think about a punt, something like Rabiot, because I can't move into Enzo Fernandez. I could also think about, of course, going for someone like Luka Modric as well, depending on how I feel about, let's say, the kind of pre-Argentina news, if we get any kind of wind of maybe any injuries in the camp and so on and so forth. That's going to be my thoughts on the team selection so far, though.